My name is Norman. I'm 35 years old and the CEO of a $30 million cybersecurity company I built from the ground up. Tonight was meant to be a celebration, 10 years of progress, effort, and sacrifice. Instead, my father, Walter, stood up, took the microphone, and told our investors that my sister, Jessica, would be stepping in as CEO. She has no background in technology. "Just continue," I said calmly, as the room went silent. Before I explain what happened afterward, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe to follow this story of betrayal and rebuilding. Growing up in the Anderson household meant living under extremely high expectations. My father, Walter, built his construction company through determination and a relentless work ethic. He expected the same from his children, though his standards shifted depending on who he was talking to. "Norman, a 96% isn't enough. Why not 100? He would ask, looking over my report card with disappointment. Meanwhile, Jessica would bring home straight B's and receive praise for being well-rounded. My mother, Diana, acted as the mediator. When tension rose between my father and me, she stepped in gently. "Walter, he's trying his best." But her words never changed his mind. She valued peace over conflict, which meant his opinion always prevailed. Jessica was 3 years older and had a natural charm that drew people in. She was attractive, outgoing, and always knew how to make adults smile. She became the golden child with little effort. While I worked hard for every small acknowledgement, Jessica collected praise easily. My support came from my younger sister, Sarah. 4 years younger, she admired me sincerely. "Show me how it works, Norm," she would say as I took apart and rebuilt computers in our shared basement. She was the only one who saw my potential without demanding proof. Computers became my escape at age 9 when my uncle gave me an old desktop. While other kids played sport, I spent hours learning programming, networking, and early cybersecurity concepts. "Those computer games won't get you anywhere," my father would scoff when he saw me coding late at night. "Learn real skills, Norman. Look at Jessica. She's already interning at my friend's marketing firm." He never understood that what he called games were early attempts at building security tools. In his eyes, work only mattered if you could physically touch it. Everything shifted when I turned 16. Our high school database was hacked, exposing confidential student information. The administration was in chaos. During computer class, I discovered a vulnerability in the school's network that likely caused the breach. "Principal Thompson, I think I know how they got in," I said after knocking on his door. He was unsure at first, but allowed me to demonstrate. Within 3 hours, I identified the flaw, built a patch, and added additional protections. "You may have saved us from a major lawsuit, Norman," he said, shaking my hand. "You have a real gift." That night, I rushed home with a commendation letter from the school board. "Mom, Dad, look," I said, handing them the letter. My father skimmed it and passed it to my mother. "That's nice. Did you finish your college applications? Deadline's coming up." No congratulations. No acknowledgement that I had done something meaningful. Jessica, home for the weekend, glanced at the letter. "Oh, computer stuff again. At least it'll help with your application," she shrugged. Only Sarah understood. Later that evening, she knocked on my door. "That was really cool, Norm. You're like a computer superhero." Her words stayed with me. I realized I didn't need my father's approval. I didn't need Jessica to understand. I would build something so valuable that even he couldn't ignore it. What I didn't know then was how that decision would eventually force me to choose between my vision and my need for acceptance. College was where things began to take shape. At Northwestern University, I met people who understood that technology was the future. Among them were Marcus and Ethan, who became my closest friends and later the co-founders of what would grow into a $30 million company. Marcus was a programming genius. While I specialized in security systems, Marcus wrote code with precision and efficiency. "The computer shouldn't work harder than it has to," he'd say as he refined our early tools. Ethan was our marketing mind, charismatic and innovative. He knew how to turn technical details into clear value for clients. "People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it," he'd repeat as he shaped our brand message. Our dorm room became our first office. 3 desks squeezed together, monitors stacked on textbooks, whiteboards covering the walls. We combined our savings, just $2,000, and created Shield Tech security solutions during junior year. Those early days were intense. Classes by day, building the company at night. 20-hour workdays were normal. Meals were instant noodles and energy drinks. Whenever doubt crept in, I heard my father's voice. "Those computer games won't get you anywhere." I turned that doubt into fuel. "We need to target small businesses," I said during a late-night strategy session. "They face real threats, but can't afford enterprise-level protection." Our first product was a cybersecurity package designed for small businesses at an affordable price. We didn't just provide software, we educated clients on why cybersecurity mattered. For months, we had only a few clients. Then came a turning point. A local accounting firm that had bought our basic package was hit by ransomware. Our system detected the attack and isolated the infected machines. "You saved us," the owner said emotionally. "We could have lost everything." Word spread in the local business community. Our client list jumped from 10 to 50 in just 2 months. Then came the email that changed everything. A venture capitalist had heard about our work. "You're filling a major gap in the market," the email read. "I'd like to discuss investing." I remember sitting in a coffee shop, facing an investor in a sharp suit. He slid a term sheet offering $500,000 for 15% of the company. My hands shook as I signed it, valuing our dorm room startup at over $3 million. "This is just the start," Ethan said that night. "We're going to change how small businesses see security." With the investment, we rented an office, hired our first staff, and expanded our products. I worked tirelessly, often sleeping under my desk. The company became my identity and my redemption. We developed systems that detected unusual activity early, created clear dashboards for non-technical users, and built training tools that turned employees into active defenders. 3 years later, Shield Tech had 30 employees and $2 million in annual revenue. We moved into a larger downtown office. My father still dismissed my work as computer stuff, but I no longer needed his approval. The market validated us daily. What I didn't expect was that Shield Tech would soon pull my family back into my life in ways I couldn't imagine. 5 years after starting the company, we hit a major milestone, a $10 million valuation after our Series B round. We had clients in 43 states. Then came the call that changed everything. "Norman, it's about your father," my mother said, her voice shaking. "Anderson Construction is bankrupt. The bank is taking the house." My father had made a series of severe financial mistakes. taking on projects beyond his company's ability and refusing to adapt. His pride kept him from asking for help until it was too late. "Everything is gone," my mother said. "The business, the savings, maybe even the house. He hasn't left his study in days." I flew home immediately. The man who greeted me wasn't the confident figure I remembered. He looked defeated. "I never thought it would end like this," he said. 40 years of work gone." In that moment, my need for his approval disappeared. This wasn't about proving anything. It was about helping my family. "We'll figure it out, Dad," I promised. And we did. I cleared their major debts, brought in financial advisors, and bought my parents a modest, mortgage-free home. "You don't have to do this," my father insisted. "I want to," I said. Word spread quickly. Jessica, who had been drifting between marketing jobs, approached me at my parents' housewarming. "It's incredible what you did," she said sincerely, something I rarely heard from her. Then came the shift. "I've been thinking of changing careers, something more stable." A week later, my father called with what he called a perfect idea. "Jessica needs a fresh start, and you need someone to manage staff issue. She has a business degree and corporate experience." The pressure was subtle but strong. After everything I'd done, how could I refuse? Against my instincts, and despite Marcus and Ethan's concerns, I created an HR director position for Jessica. Problems started immediately. She arrived late, left early, and said she needed flexibility. She made hiring decisions based on personal ties, not qualifications. She created policies without understanding how they affected our technical teams. "We need to discuss that new vacation policy," Marcus said. 3 senior developers are looking for new jobs. They think we don't get tech culture." I spent hours fixing Jessica's mistakes and shielding her from criticism. When deadlines slipped, I worked weekends to compensate. "You can't keep covering for her," Ethan warned. "This company isn't your family's safety net." But how could I explain that? For the first time, my family valued something I built. How Jessica was doing, showing more interest in my company than ever before. During dinner with Sarah, she finally said what I didn't want to face. "Norman, you should know something. Jessica tells people she's basically running your company. She takes credit when you're not around." "She's exaggerating," I said. Sarah shook her head. "It's more than that. She told Mom and Dad that you're the CEO in title. But she makes the big decisions because you're too focused on the technical stuff." I brushed it off, but the comment stayed with me. That night, I reviewed Jessica's company emails. What I found stunned me. She had introduced herself to clients as Executive Director of Operations, a title that didn't exist. She held meetings with department heads without telling me. The line between family loyalty and business integrity was fading fast, and soon the consequences would be impossible to ignore. One Tuesday morning, I walked into our quarterly strategy meeting to find Jessica already seated at the head of the table, the spot I normally occupied. "I saved you a seat," she said brightly, pointing to an empty chair beside her, as if she were doing me a favor. The confusion on my executive team's faces was obvious, though no one wanted to escalate the situation. I took the seat she offered, led the meeting professionally, and waited until we were alone to discuss the matter. "Jessica, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but these meetings follow established protocols," I said calmly. She rolled her eyes. "Norman, you're being overly formal. We're family. Plus, I've told the team we need to make changes. The hierarchy is too rigid." "The hierarchy exists for a reason," I replied. "I'm the CEO. These are my direct reports. You're the HR director." "Labels," she said, waving her hand dismissively. Dad always said titles matter less than results. Our father had never said anything like that. ... But arguing would have been pointless. Things worsened when I learned Jessica had started calling herself a co-leader in discussions with staff. Several employees approached me, unsure about the chain of command. I'm getting conflicting instructions, said Travis, one of our senior security analysts. You told us to prioritize the hospital firewall upgrade, but Jessica told us to focus on new client presentations. Fixing these situations required constant damage control and took time away from actual business growth. Marcus and Ethan watched with concern as more of my energy was spent managing my sister rather than leading the company. The breaking point came when Jessica nearly cost us Meridian Healthcare, a client worth over $1 million annually. What should have been a simple renewal meeting turned problematic when she attended without being invited and promised features our platform couldn't deliver in the timeline she suggested. Meridian's CIO told me during a call. That's why we agreed to the price increase. I spent 3 days restructuring development timelines and personally asking the engineering team for help to meet the deadline Jessica had promised. The cost to the company was steep, both in overtime and in delayed work for other clients. When I confronted Jessica in my office, her reaction stunned me. You should be thanking me, she said boldly. I secured a 20% increase in their contract value. By promising timelines we can't meet, I replied. We're handling sensitive healthcare data. We can't rush security features. This is your problem, Norman, she sighed, as if explaining something obvious. You get too lost in technical details and miss the bigger business picture. My patience finally snapped. This is my company, Jessica. I built it from the ground up. I brought you in as a favor to our marketing job, but you're undermining everything we've built. Her expression tightened. But we're family, Norman. Family businesses should be shared. Mom and Dad agree. They think you've become too controlling since the company grew. I was stunned. You've been discussing company matters with our parents? Of course, she said easily. Dad's been giving me great advice on how to help you manage things better. He thinks you need a strong second in command who understands business beyond cybersecurity. Later that week, my parents invited me to Sunday dinner. What I expected to be a standard family meal turned into a kind of intervention. Norman, my father began once we sat in the living room, your mother and I are worried about how you're treating Jessica at the company. I stared at him, shocked. How I'm treating Jessica? She's trying to contribute and help build a family legacy, he continued. But you're resisting her input. Walter, I said, using his first name to make a point. Jessica has been here for less than a year. She has no tech background. She's making client promises we can't keep and confusing our staff with contradictory instructions. She has an MBA, my mother added, as if that outweighed a decade of industry experience. From State University, I responded, though I regretted the tone. But that's not the issue. Shield Tech isn't a family business. It's a technology company with investors, a board, and employees who depend on clear leadership. My father leaned forward. Norman, we're proud of what you've done, but you need to think about the future. Jessica needs stability and a real career path. As head of the family, I'm asking you to give her more responsibility. Head of the family? I repeated. Dad, I'm 34. I run a multi-million-dollar company. I don't need direction. The conversation fell apart from there. I left feeling like I had forced to defend decisions to a father who didn't understand or respect the work I was doing. Back at the office, Marcus and Ethan shared their concerns. Norman, we need to talk about Jessica, Marcus said during our Monday check-in. The development team is confused about priorities. Morale is dropping. Ethan added, 3 potential investors asked me about our management structure. Word is spreading that there's internal conflict. I rubbed my temples. I know. I'll handle it. We're not just your co-founders, Ethan said gently. We're your friends. And as your friends, we have to ask, are you letting family dynamics put our company at risk? It was a fair question. With the company's 10-year anniversary approaching, I saw it as the perfect opportunity to reaffirm leadership roles. What I didn't know was that Jessica and my father had their own plans for the event. The celebration was meant to be a major milestone, a moment to look back on our journey from a college dorm room to a $30 million cybersecurity firm. I personally oversaw every detail, from the venue to the multimedia presentation showing our growth. The guest list included early clients, venture capitalists, industry partners, and our entire team. 3 days before the event, while reviewing details with our events coordinator, I received an urgent message from Keith, our CFO. Norman, we need to talk about the Westfield contract. Something's wrong. Westfield Technologies was a new enterprise client with a potential $3 million partnership over 5 years. I had personally structured the timeline to ensure deliverability. In Keith's office, he pulled up the final contract. This isn't the version we approved, he said, pointing at updated clauses. The timeline has been accelerated by 2 months, and there are new service guarantees that weren't in the original. My stomach dropped when I saw Jessica's digital signature next to the client's. When did this happen? The edits were made last week. I assumed you gave Jessica permission to finalize it. I had not. We discovered she accessed our contract system using my credentials, likely after watching me log in during a previous meeting. I immediately called an emergency meeting with Marcus, Ethan, and our legal counsel, Lisa Bennett. This is a serious breach, Lisa said after reviewing the documents. These new terms include penalties if we miss the accelerated deadlines, and meeting them is highly unlikely. Can we void it? I asked. Lisa shook her head. Not without losing the client and causing legal and reputational damage. Jessica presented herself as having signing authority. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. To meet this timeline, the development team will have to pull resources from 3 other ongoing projects with existing commitments. The implications. Meeting the contract terms would stretch our resources thin. Failing would result in financial penalties and harm our reputation. We have to try, I said finally. I'll talk to the team leads about shifting resources. I'll deal with Jessica after the anniversary event. As the meeting ended, my assistant walked in. Norman, your father is here. He wants to join your next meeting. My father stood in the reception area wearing a business suit I hadn't seen since before his company's bankruptcy. I wanted to check how the anniversary preparations are going, he said cheerfully. Dad, I'm handling a situation. Perfect timing. I have ideas about how to structure the executive presentations. Without waiting, he followed me into the conference room, where Marcus, Ethan, and Lisa were still present. Walter, Marcus said politely, though tension was clear. This is an unexpected visit. Thought I'd offer some experience, my father said, taking a seat. I ran a successful business for 40 years before things changed. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. His business had ended in bankruptcy, while the cybersecurity company he once dismissed now supported his retirement. We're discussing a sensitive contract issue, I said, trying to regain control. A contract is a contract, he replied. What matters is the anniversary celebration. It's a chance to position the company for its next phase of leadership. His wording set off alarm bells. The company's leadership isn't changing, I said. Every company evolves, Norman. And where's Jessica? Shouldn't she be involved as a senior director? Before I could correct him, Ethan stepped in. Walter, with respect, this meeting is for the founding executive team. My father frowned. Jessica told me she's being excluded from key decisions. As someone advising her career, I find that concerning. Lisa, noticing the shift in tone, excused herself. After she left, Marcus spoke. Walter, we value Jessica's contributions in her area, but some decisions require technical knowledge and historical context. What Marcus means, I added, is that Jessica is still learning. She's been here 11 months. My father stood abruptly. I see. The same Norman, unwilling to share the spotlight. Jessica was right about you. After he left, silence filled the room. Norman, Ethan said, this is beyond family tension. Your father and sister seem to have plans for the company's leadership. The anniversary event is in 3 days, Marcus added. If they're planning something, it'll happen there. Despite everything, I continued preparing for the celebration. When the evening arrived, the ballroom at the Westbrook Hotel looked incredible. Digital displays highlighted our journey, and client testimonials played throughout the space. My parents arrived early, with my father unusually focused on seating and the program schedule. Jessica arrived soon after, dressed in an executive-style suit that surpassed even mine. "Isn't this exciting?" she said, quickly joining conversations with key investors, as though she had helped found the company. The formal program began with my welcome speech. Standing at the podium, looking out at 150 guests who represented a decade of relationships, I felt a brief sense of pride. 10 years ago, Marcus, Ethan, and I were in a college dorm room with a vision to make enterprise-grade cybersecurity accessible. I began. We had no funding, no connections, and no promise of success. But we believed every organization deserved strong digital protection. I walked the audience through our journey, from our first small client to our current portfolio of more than 500 organizations. I acknowledged contributions from every department and recognized team members who had been with us from the start. ShieldTech's success isn't mine alone, I said. I emphasized that it belonged to everyone in the room who had taken a chance on us, joined our mission, and trusted us with their digital security. As I prepared to introduce Marcus for the next segment, my father suddenly stood up from his table near the front. Before anyone could react, he walked directly to the stage and took the microphone from my hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying the authority he had developed over decades in construction. "As the father of Norman and Jessica Anderson, I couldn't be prouder of what this family has achieved." A wave of confusion moved through the room. This was not part of the program. "Norman has built something impressive, no question," he continued. "But a company entering its second decade needs to think about succession and new perspectives." He motioned toward Jessica, who stood with a practiced, modest smile. "That's why I'm thrilled to announce that Jessica Anderson will be stepping into the role of Chief Executive Officer, leading ShieldTech into its next chapter." The ballroom went silent. Investors exchanged uncertain looks. Employees froze mid-sip. Marcus and Ethan stared in open disbelief. I felt an unusual calm settle over me as I watched this attempt unfold in front of everyone. Months of subtle undermining, conversations behind my back, and the manipulation of my parents suddenly aligned into a clear picture. With steady movements, I took back the microphone. My father looked triumphant, clearly expecting me to cooperate with this public announcement rather than cause disruption. Instead, I looked directly at him and said, "Just keep going." My voice was firm, controlled, and carried a finality that silenced even him. In that moment, something changed. The rest of the evening continued with awkward conversations and forced smiles. But beneath the surface, I was already planning my response to this challenge to everything I had built. While most people would have walked out after such a public betrayal, I stayed for the remainder of the anniversary celebration, shaking hands, thanking clients, and acting as though my father's announcement had been nothing more than an uncomfortable remark. My calm expression hid the strategy forming in my mind. "Marcus, Ethan, my office, 7 a.m. tomorrow," I whispered as guests began leaving. They nodded, understanding the seriousness of the situation. I also made sure to speak briefly and warmly with our 3 largest investors. "Joseph, I'd value your insight on something tomorrow. Could you make time for a 9 a.m. call?" By the time I left the venue, I had scheduled early meetings with everyone whose support would be essential. At 6:30 the next morning, I was already at my desk when Marcus walked in, followed by Ethan. "That was the most surreal event I've ever attended," Marcus said, falling into a chair. "Your father actually tried to name Jessica as CEO in public without board approval." "The question is, what's our next move?" Ethan asked, always focused on strategy. I slid a folder across the desk. "I was up all night preparing this. It's our company bylaws, ownership structure, and board setup." Together, we reviewed the documents drafted during the early funding rounds and updated with later investments. "According to this," Marcus said, "executive appointments require board approval, and the founding members have special voting rights." "Exactly. My father has no authority to appoint anyone," I confirmed. "But this isn't only a legal issue. It's about perception and stability. If investors, clients, or employees think leadership is unstable, the company is at risk." "We need to control the narrative," Ethan said, already forming communication plans. Over the next 3 hours, we developed a detailed strategy. First, individual calls to board members explaining what happened and reaffirming leadership. Second, a company-wide email clarifying that no leadership changes were underway. Third, personal outreach to key clients to maintain confidence. By noon, every board member had issued statements of support. By 3 p.m., all major clients had been contacted. The immediate perception crisis was under control, but the underlying family issue remained. "You need to understand what Jessica has been doing," Marcus said. "This didn't happen overnight." He was right. I needed information, and I knew where to get it. That evening, I met Sarah for dinner at a quiet restaurant away from our usual family locations. "I was hoping you'd call," she said as soon as we sat down. "Last night was unbelievable. I need to know everything, Sarah." "When did this start? Who else knows about it?" She took a deep breath. "It's worse than you realize, Norman. Jessica has been planning this for months. She's in serious financial trouble." The details came out slowly. Jessica had made several poor investments, taking on high-interest loans and facing potential bankruptcy. Possibly worse if some of her financial decisions crossed legal boundaries. She convinced Dad that taking over Shield Tech would solve everything quietly and quickly, Sarah explained. "She told him you wouldn't even notice since you're focused on technical work, and he believed it. You know how he is about Jessica, and I think he sees this as a way to regain control after losing his business. The information was crucial, but I needed more than conversation. I need evidence, Sarah. Actual documents." "I figured you might," she said, sliding a USB drive across the table. Jessica asked me to help organize some of her files. These are copies of emails between her and Dad, plus financial documents she had me scan. I'm not proud of taking them, but what they're doing isn't right. The drive contained more than enough. Emails planning how to slowly transition control, financial records showing escalating debts, and draft press releases announcing her as CEO months before the anniversary. With this information, I began what I privately called Operation Truth. First, I hired a forensic accountant to review Jessica's activities. The findings were alarming. She had accessed client information without permission, modified contracts, and even attempted to redirect a small number of client payments into another account. Next, I recorded every instance of operational issues or client complaints linked to her actions. The pattern was undeniable. She had been creating problems for me to solve, then using those incidents to suggest to our parents that I was struggling. The most concerning discovery came from our security logs. Jessica had attempted to access our intellectual property database, which held the source code and architecture for our core security products. If she had succeeded, she could have sold or leveraged this information. With thorough evidence gathered, I prepared for a confrontation that could no longer be avoided. But before that, I needed to protect the company. I met with the legal team to draft documents restricting Jessica's access and authority. I also scheduled a special board meeting for the following week, including a formal vote of confidence. 3 days after the anniversary incident, I invited my parents and Jessica to my home, a neutral space. They arrived together, Jessica confident, my father stern, my mother uneasy. They clearly expected me to back down after having time to think. "Thank you for coming," I began once we were seated. "After what happened at the anniversary event, we need to address several important issues. If this is about the timing of the announcement, I apologize," my father said, though his tone did not match his words. "But the decision is correct. Shield Tech needs new leadership for its next stage." "That's not your decision to make," I replied calmly. "And before we continue, I want to be clear. Jessica will not be becoming CEO. Not now, not ever." Jessica let out a dismissive laugh. "Norman, don't exaggerate. You're not being pushed aside. You'll still handle the technical work, which you prefer anyway." "What I prefer," I said steadily, "is the company I built from the ground up into a $30 million business that employs 78 people and protects the digital assets of more than 500 clients." I turned my laptop toward them. "What I don't prefer is discovering that my sister has been undermining the company while positioning herself to take control." For the next hour, I presented the evidence. Jessica's unauthorized contract, attempts to access restricted systems, financial issues, and emails between her and my father planning the takeover. My mother gasped several times. My father grew visibly pale. Jessica's confidence collapsed. "You had no right to access my personal emails," she said weakly. "You had no right to attempt to take my company," I answered. "A company that has been supporting this entire family since Dad's business failed." The truth hung heavily in the air. For years, I had softened realities to protect feelings, especially my father's. That ended now. "Norman," my father began, his voice no longer carrying its usual certainty. "We only ever wanted what would benefit everyone. Jessica needs what Jessica needs," my mother began, but I cut her off. "What Jessica needs," I said calmly, "is to face the results of her choices, like an adult. What she does not need is to be continually saved while others pay the price." I closed my laptop. "I've scheduled a special board meeting for Monday." The board will vote to reaffirm the current leadership and officially state that Jessica has no executive authority at Shield Tech. You can't do this, Jessica whispered, tears gathering. I'll lose everything. My creditors. Your financial issues are not Shield Tech's responsibility, I replied. But out of respect for the family, I'm willing to help you work through them as long as you resign immediately and agree to proper financial counseling. My father stood sharply. This is how you treat family? After all we've done for you? The question was so far from reality that I actually laughed. And what exactly have you done for me, Dad? Ignored my passion and called it computer games? Criticized my work while praising Jessica for doing the minimum? Allowed me to support you financially after your business failed? Then teamed up with her to take over mine? My mother placed a hand on his arm. Walter, please. Norman is right. We've made serious mistakes. The discussion went on for another hour, moving through anger, denial, and eventually reluctant acceptance. When they finally left, Jessica had agreed to step down. My father withdrew into hurt silence, and my mother apologized through tears. By comparison, Monday's board meeting felt uneventful. The vote was unanimous. My position as CEO was reaffirmed, and new governance measures were adopted to ensure nothing similar could happen again. Jessica cleared out her office that afternoon, with security present to make sure no company data left with her. As I promised, I arranged financial advisors to help her negotiate with creditors and create a realistic repayment plan. Our relationship was strained, maybe permanently, but family responsibility still mattered to me. The most surprising conversation came a week later, when my father asked to meet alone. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he said, looking older and more unsure than I'd ever seen him. I owe you an apology. Oh, Norman, a lifetime of them, honestly. He explained how his own father had dismissed his interest in construction, pushing him toward a college path he never wanted. He told me how he succeeded anyway, fueled by the desire to prove his father wrong, and how without realizing it, he repeated the same pattern with me. I was wrong, he said simply. What you've built is remarkable, and instead of being proud, I tried to force it into my outdated idea of real work. The acknowledgement I had wanted for decades had finally come, though not in the way I imagined. Thank you, I said, realizing the validation I once needed now meant far less. I no longer relied on his approval. In the months that followed, Shield Tech not only recovered, it grew stronger. The firm stance we took reassured clients and investors. Our transparency showed our commitment to governance and ethical practices. 6 months later, in a decision that even surprised me, I invited Sarah to join us as the Community Outreach Director, a position well-suited to her empathy and communication skills. Unlike Jessica's placement, Sarah earned her role and followed all proper hiring procedures. I won't disappoint you, she said on her first day. I know, I replied, confident in her abilities rather than her relationship to me. As for Jessica, our interactions remained distant but polite. She eventually found work at a marketing firm in another state, giving her a fresh start away from family pressure. My father and I slowly formed a healthier relationship, built on respect instead of hierarchy or unmet expectations. Shield Tech continued its rapid growth, soon reaching the $30 million valuation that once felt out of reach for the 3 students working out of a cramped dorm. But more importantly, I finally built the boundaries I needed to guide both my company and my life on my own terms. 1 year after the disastrous anniversary event that nearly destroyed both my family and my company, I sat at the head of a very different dinner table. My parents were there, along with Sarah, who was thriving in her role at ShieldTech. Jessica declined the invitation, focusing on her own path of accountability in another state. Marcus and Ethan attended with their families, our partnership stronger than ever after weathering so much together. The evening wasn't just to acknowledge ShieldTech's ongoing success. It celebrated something deeper: genuine relationships and healthy boundaries. Getting to this point had been difficult, but necessary. After the board meeting that confirmed my leadership, I dedicated myself to rebuilding what the conflict had threatened. We needed to reinforce client relationships, restore the internal culture, and I needed to examine my own approach to family dynamics. The hardest part wasn't confronting Jessica and Dad. I told Dr. Thompson, the therapist I began seeing weekly. It was realizing that I had allowed the situation to form by constantly looking for approval from people who couldn't give it. Through therapy, I learned that my desire to prove myself through ShieldTech had been both a strength and a weakness. I had built a multi-million-dollar company partly to show my father my work had value, leaving me open to manipulation through his approval. Success built on needing someone else's validation is like building on sand, Dr. Thompson said. You need a stronger foundation. That foundation came from reconnecting with my true passion for cybersecurity and my goal of protecting small businesses from digital threats. ShieldTech wasn't meaningful because it impressed my father. It mattered because it served a real purpose. This shift changed how I led. I became more confident, less reactive, and more intentional. The board noticed the difference. So did our team and clients. You seem different, Marcus remarked in a strategy meeting months later. More centered. He was right. Letting go of the need for outside validation freed me to lead authentically. Family healing took longer. My father struggled to adjust to his reduced authority. During one honest conversation, I addressed the core issue. I didn't build ShieldTech to prove you wrong, I said. I built it because I believe in protecting people online. But I did spend years hoping you'd acknowledge my work, and that made me vulnerable. He nodded, clearly recognizing his part in everything. I measured success by standards that no longer apply. I couldn't accept how much the world had changed. We can't change the past, I replied, but we can choose better going forward. And slowly, we did. My mother, freed from always playing mediator, began focusing on her own interests. Sarah continued to flourish professionally and personally. Jessica's journey was more difficult. Financial counseling helped her avoid bankruptcy, but rebuilding trust would take time. Our contact remained limited, though each call grew slightly less tense. Looking around the dinner table that anniversary night, I felt a sense of completeness that had nothing to do with revenue or external praise. I'd like to propose a toast, I said, raising my glass. Not to ShieldTech's success, though I'm proud of it, but to something more essential: the courage to stand up for what matters, even when it's uncomfortable. And the understanding that true success isn't determined by others' approval, but by whether we remain honest with ourselves. The company continued to grow beyond our earlier valuation goals, but I no longer saw numbers as proof of my worth. Our real success came from the culture we built. a workplace where merit truly mattered, innovation thrived, and leadership was earned, not inherited or forced. Sarah's department launched a cybersecurity education program for public schools, teaching students about online safety and inspiring future experts. In a surprising turn, my father even volunteered to speak to the students about adapting to new industries and supporting the passions of young people, even when those interests seem unfamiliar. The biggest lesson I carry forward is this: sometimes the most meaningful act of care, for yourself and others, is establishing firm boundaries. Real relationships, whether in business or family, grow from mutual respect and recognizing each person's inherent worth. Leadership isn't about titles or control. It's about creating a space where people can do their best work toward a shared mission. And long-lasting success doesn't come from external praise, but from aligning your actions with your deepest values. I built a $30 million company that ended up supporting my entire family. But the most valuable thing I created wasn't financial. It was the strength to hold my ground, even when the people closest to me pushed against it. If any part of my journey connects with your own, I'd love to hear about moments when you had to set boundaries with family in your work life. Have you ever had to choose between pleasing others and staying true to yourself? Share your story in the comments. If my experience offered any insight, please like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who may be facing similar challenges. Thank you for being here on this journey of growth and understanding. Remember, your worth isn't defined by someone else's validation. It comes from your own integrity and purpose.